There was a receipt pinned to our fridge with a smiley face drawn in blue ink. That alone wouldn't be weird. Meredith sometimes doodled on sticky notes or left little reminders when she wanted me to grab oat milk or clean the lint trap. But this time, the receipt wasn't ours. It was from a restaurant I'd never heard of, Barrow and Finch. Candlelit tables, private booths, the kind of place that doesn't show prices on the menu. Time stamped, 9:42 p.m. Friday. 2 entrees. 2 drinks. A dessert labeled share plate. I stood there staring at it like it was some kind of forgotten relic. My hands were shaking, but not from anger. From confusion. Meredith had told me she was working late Friday night. Museum budget meetings, she said, with city reps. But the thing that got me? The handwriting on the smiley face wasn't hers. Meredith writes in all caps. This was cursive, elegant, slanted slightly left. And below the receipt, someone had written in tiny ballpoint pen, "Thanks for an unforgettable night, A." I didn't take the receipt down. I didn't even move. Instead, I sat down at our dining table and opened my laptop like I always did. Not because I had work. I just didn't know what else to do with my hands. 15 minutes later, she walked in the door. Coat slung over one arm, phone in the other, keys jingling in that nervous rhythm she had whenever she was thinking too hard. She didn't see me at first, just dropped her bag by the shoes, kicked them off, and sighed loudly into the apartment. Then her eyes landed on the fridge. She froze. I didn't even have to say anything. Her whole face changed. She took 2 steps toward it like she might try to snatch it down, but stopped when I spoke. "Who's A?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She wasn't ready for that question. Usually, I'm the one who stutters, who backs down, who apologizes for asking. Not this time. She cleared her throat. "It's complicated." "No, I think it's very simple." I stood up, slowly, calmly. "You had dinner with someone. Someone who drew smiley faces. Someone who thanked you for the night." Meredith wrapped her arms around herself. "Look, Curtis, just tell me the truth." "I am," she insisted. "Okay, it wasn't what you think. We were just talking. We've been talking for a while. And Friday I needed to feel something." "You're married," I said, "to me." And then she looked me dead in the eyes and said 7 words I still hear every time I try to sleep. "I have a date tonight, too." She said it like she was letting go of a rope she'd been gripping for too long. I stared at her. I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but no sound came out. I wanted to scream, cry, laugh, break something, break her. But instead, I nodded. I didn't ask who. I didn't ask where. I didn't beg. I just reached into the drawer next to the fridge, pulled out a permanent marker, walked over to the receipt, and calmly circled the words, "Unforgettable night." Then I picked up my phone, walked past her, and left. She asked where I was going. I said I had plans too. But what I didn't say is that I wasn't going to meet someone. I was going to ruin too. It's strange what adrenaline does to your memory. You'd think I'd forget the little details, the sounds, the smells, but I remember everything from that night. The flicker of the street lamp outside our apartment buzzing like it was shorting out. The chill in the October air. How my fingers trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. And the growing pressure in my chest like something inside me had snapped, quietly and cleanly, without leaving a mark on the outside. I didn't drive anywhere. I just walked. For maybe an hour, maybe 3. I had no real plan. Just a thought that kept crawling through my head like a worm. She left the receipt on purpose. Because Meredith isn't careless. She's methodical. A strategist. She's the kind of person who builds Excel sheets for birthday gifts 6 months in advance. She wouldn't accidentally leave a receipt with another man's handwriting pinned to the fridge like a child's art project. No, this was a test. Or a declaration. Or worse, maybe she wanted me to see it. Maybe she wanted to break something. I guess she got her wish. Eventually, I ended up back at our building. The lights were off in our windows. Her car was gone. She'd really gone on the date. Just like she said. But here's the part she didn't expect. I wasn't going to sit around and wait like a sad puppy. I knew someone at Barrow and Finch. Well, not new, but I had installed a security patch for their point-of-sale system 3 months ago. Small contract, not even memorable at the time. But I kept all the records. Every job, every login. So I opened my laptop and went digging. 10 minutes later, I had access to the customer receipts from that night. I shouldn't have done it. Maybe it was unethical. Illegal, even. But I couldn't stop myself. I searched the receipt number. There it was. Table 9. Server name, Andy. Guest 1, Meredith K. Guest 2, Alan B. Alan. I stared at the name, and at first it didn't register. I thought, no way. Not him. Not in a million years. But when I cross-checked it against the phone number listed for the reservation, my stomach turned cold. It was him. Alan Brooks. My former manager. My fired former manager. A guy I once looked up to until he threw me under the bus during a departmental audit. He tanked my chances at a promotion by blaming his screw-up on me, then smiled while doing it. I never got an apology. Just a smug text 6 months later that said, "No hard feelings. Just business." I hadn't seen him since. Now he was having shared dessert with my wife. My hands clenched so hard I thought the bones might crack. I shut the laptop and just sat there in the dark, staring at the fridge. The receipt was still there. Smug. Innocent. Mocking. I wanted to storm into that restaurant and flip their table. Scream. Ruin him. Ruin her. But then something clicked in me, in a way that felt unnaturally calm. If Meredith was playing games, I'd play a better one. And Alan? He thought he was clever, using a fake name to avoid being seen. I already had his full work history, LinkedIn, old email backups, phone records. He left digital fingerprints all over the place years ago, and I had access to things he thought were long deleted, including the one thing I knew could really shatter him, the NDA breach from his last job before ours. But I didn't act right away. No, I waited. I listened. Because when Meredith came home that night, at 1:17 a.m., she found me sitting at the dining table with the lights on. Her hair was windswept, and she smelled like his cologne. She looked surprised, almost disappointed, to see me awake. "Still up?" she asked, voice cautious. "I couldn't sleep," I replied calmly. "How was your date?" Her lips parted slightly. She hadn't expected the question. She probably thought I'd pretend it didn't happen, that I'd suppress it to keep the peace. "It was fine," she said slowly, placing her purse down. Curtis sighed. "You know what the worst part is?" I interrupted. "You didn't even bother to change the locks before you burned the house down." She blinked. "What does that mean?" But I didn't answer. I just smiled, stood up, and walked to the bedroom without another word. Because by morning, she would understand exactly what I meant. And Alan? Alan would wish he never found her on LinkedIn. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I just sat there at the dining table with my laptop open, eyes burning from the blue light, watching the digital clock crawl toward dawn. Outside, the world was quiet, too quiet. Every time a car passed, I thought it might be her coming home early, but she didn't. Meredith stayed out until after 1 in the morning. I heard the door creak, heard her shoes hit the tile, heard her whisper a sigh like she was trying to exhale the guilt before I could smell it. But I didn't move. I just stared at the blank screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat I couldn't calm down. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. No shouting, no confrontation, just quiet precision. Meredith had no idea that while she was out drinking red wine and finding herself, I was quietly setting up something that would haunt her far longer than an argument. See, Alan Brooks, the man behind that smiling receipt, wasn't just my ex-manager. He was also the one who once bragged during office parties about keeping personal copies of company project files, just in case he needed leverage someday. It was his favorite word, leverage. He used it like armor. He told everyone that business was about who could twist harder without breaking their own hand. He thought he was untouchable, but I remembered everything he'd said, because back then, I was the guy cleaning up his messes, and I still had those backups. His leverage was sitting on one of my encrypted drives, collecting dust. Until now. At 6:12 a.m., while Meredith was still asleep in our bed, I opened that old folder. I knew it was wrong. I knew this wasn't what good people do. But I wasn't feeling like a good person anymore. I was tired of being the quiet one, the patient one, the man who forgave because he was afraid to lose what little he had. So, I made a new folder, labeled it AB_records, dragged everything inside, confidential plans, client data, the kind of stuff that could ruin a man's career faster than one bad headline. And I encrypted it with a simple passphrase, smiley face. Then I scheduled an anonymous email. It wasn't sent yet. It was queued. All it would take was a single click later in the day to send it directly to Alan's current employer. A copy would go to the company's compliance department and another to their legal team. I didn't need revenge. I just needed a mirror, and I was about to hold it up. Around 8, Meredith stumbled into the kitchen wearing one of my old shirts, pretending we were still the same couple we'd been a year ago. "Morning," she said, her voice stretched thin. I looked at her without smiling. She tried to sound casual. Might come home late again tonight. Don't wait up, okay?" She didn't meet my eyes. I leaned back in the chair and nodded. "That's fine," I said quietly. "I've got a meeting tonight, too." Her brow furrowed, like she wasn't sure if I was mocking her. "Since when do you have meetings at night?" "Since I decided to stop wasting daylight." She frowned, brushed her hair back, and grabbed her coffee. She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she didn't want to know. Or maybe, deep down, she already did. The moment she walked out the door, I watched her car disappear down the street. My chest tightened, not with heartbreak anymore, but with something colder. Purpose. Then I clicked send. It took less than 20 seconds for the message to process. By 8:07, the files were on their way to Alan's company servers. I sat there listening to the faint hum of my computer fan, the weight of what I'd just done pressing on me like invisible concrete. At 9:14, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. Just a single message. "What did you do, Curtis?" I stared at the screen, my pulse jumping. No one should have known yet. Not Alan. Not anyone. Unless. Meredith. I texted back one word. "What?" No reply. Just silence. But an hour later, I found out why. My work email pinged with a system alert. Someone had tried to access one of my encrypted drives remotely. It failed, of course. The password wasn't guessable. But that wasn't the point. The point was, they tried. That was when I knew Alan had already called her. And she wasn't just sorry anymore. She was terrified. By lunchtime, she'd texted me twice. Once at 12:03, "We need to talk." Then again at 12:47, "Please don't do anything stupid." I didn't reply to either. At 4 p.m., when she finally walked back through the door, her face was pale, her voice shaking. She didn't even take off her coat. "Curtis," she whispered, "whatever you did, you have to undo it. Now." I looked at her for a long moment. "Undo what, Meredith? Dinner?" She stepped closer, panic creeping into her voice. "This isn't funny. Alan's losing his job. His boss called him in. He said you." I cut her off. "He said I what?" She swallowed hard. "He said you ruined his life." And then she started to cry. For years, I'd been the one apologizing. The one patching her moods, fixing her problems, walking on eggshells to keep things stable. But not this time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't comfort her. I just stood there, listening to her sobs echo through the kitchen, the same place where she'd once told me she had a date with someone else. Now, she was realizing what it felt like to lose control of something she thought she owned. The tears didn't move me. They only confirmed one thing. The game had just started, and for once, she was the one playing catch-up. She cried for 6 straight minutes. I timed it. Not because I'm heartless, but because I didn't trust her tears. I'd seen Meredith cry over ruined soufflés, stubbed toes, and a museum gala being rained out. But this time was different. These weren't crocodile tears. They weren't manipulative, either. They were scared. She stood there in her gray trench coat, shivering slightly despite the heat still clinging to the early autumn air. Her shoulders were trembling, her mascara starting to smudge, and I could tell the walls she'd spent years building were starting to crack. Not because of me, but because of consequences she couldn't control. "Curtis," she said again, barely audible. Please undo whatever you sent." "You mean the truth?" I asked. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "It's not just about Alan now. It's about me." That sentence hung in the air for a second too long. I tilted my head. "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "Meredith, say it." She finally sat down at the edge of the couch, rubbing her palms against her thighs like she was trying to wipe off guilt that had sunk too deep into her skin. It wasn't supposed to get that far. Alan was just someone who listened. I needed that. "You don't listen to me anymore, Curtis. You haven't for years." I folded my arms. "So, instead of talking to me, you talked to my ex-manager? The guy who stabbed me in the back?" "I didn't know who he was at first," she snapped, and then instantly softened her voice. "It started out online. Just comments. Then DMs. I didn't know his last name until the 3rd week." "How long?" I asked. She looked down. "Don't stall. Say it." 7 months. I don't know what I expected. Maybe 3 weeks. A one-off dinner. A lapse in judgment. But 7 months? That was premeditated. That was strategy. That was deliberate. She kept talking. I was stupid, okay? He made me feel seen. He said all the right things. He asked about my work, my dreams, the gallery project I told you about that you forgot. I didn't forget. I cut in. You never finished the sentence. You always stopped talking when I asked questions. She blinked. Then she whispered something I didn't expect. I thought if I broke us, you'd finally react. I leaned forward. So you cheated to test if I loved you? Her voice cracked. It wasn't like that at first. But when you didn't fight for me, when you just walked away that night, I panicked. And when Alan said he might leave his job to go somewhere new with me, it felt real. It felt like I had control again. And then you sent whatever you sent. And now it's all crashing. I let the silence drag. I wanted her to sit in it. To stew. She finally looked up. Please, Curtis. Just take it back. I can't. My voice was calm. It's already gone. That was a lie, of course. The email hadn't included all the files. Just enough to set off alarm bells. The rest sat in a secure drive. I hadn't destroyed him yet, just shaken the snow globe. But she didn't know that. What do you want me to do? She asked, voice raw. Beg? Apologize on video? Move out. Just tell me what you want. I didn't answer. I just stared at her. And then I walked into the bedroom. She followed me, frantic now. Curtis, please. We can fix this. I swear. I'll do anything. I didn't think you had this in you. That made me pause. What's this, Meredith? She was crying again. The coldness. The strategy. The ruthlessness. I turned to face her. You call me boring. Predictable. Easy. And then you spent 7 months lying to my face while I packed your lunches and ordered your magnesium supplements. Now you're surprised I have edges? She couldn't meet my eyes. Then something strange happened. She dropped to her knees. I'll confess, she said, breathing hard. To Alan's company. To his wife. To your family. Just please don't finish this. And that's when the final piece clicked into place. Alan was married. Married. With a daughter, if I remembered right. She had a rare lung condition. That was one of the reasons Alan had always pushed for remote work when we were still at the same firm. He said he needed to be home more. And Meredith knew. She had to have known. The man's daughter was in half his LinkedIn posts. I felt my throat tighten. You slept with a married man with a sick child? I whispered. Her face crumbled. I didn't mean to. Did you tell me about your gallery project to feel seen? Or to see if I'd applaud while you lit everything on fire? She stood up, arms wrapped around herself like a shield. I don't know anymore. I just wanted someone to choose me. I nodded. So you burned your life to prove you still had power. She didn't respond. She just looked small, defeated. I turned back to the closet and started packing. She flinched. Where are you going? Somewhere you won't find me, I said. Not yet. You can't just disappear, Curtis. Oh, I said, smiling faintly. But that's the one thing I can do better than you. Then I walked out the door with one bag and a hard drive. And I didn't look back. Not yet. 3 days passed before she broke into the drive. I knew she would. That's why I left the dummy one on the bookshelf. I hadn't gone far, just far enough. I checked into a short-term rental under a different name in the next town over. A studio above a laundromat with paper-thin walls and a broken towel rack. Nothing fancy, just quiet. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells inside my own life. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not my brother. Not my 2 coworkers who still tolerated me. Not even my mom. Especially not my mom. She always liked Meredith a little too much. But that didn't matter now. I had one goal. To disappear, just enough, just long enough, for the pressure to build. Back home, I knew Meredith would panic. She'd try to call, of course. And she did. 17 missed calls. For voicemails. 1 sounded angry. 2 sounded like she was about to cry. The last one was just tired. She didn't say anything. Just breathed into the phone for 30 seconds and hung up. That one hit harder than the others. Because it didn't sound like someone trying to fix a mistake. It sounded like someone realizing she'd run out of ideas. But what she didn't know was that I had left her a trail on purpose. A little trap. A test. In our apartment, buried between old tax documents and my unused camping gear, I left a USB drive labeled in big, handwritten letters, private, do not open. That alone would be enough to bait her curiosity. But I'd also left it unlocked. I wanted her to find it. Because the files on that drive weren't dangerous. They were personal. Emails between me and my therapist. Old journal entries. Scans of poems I wrote when I was 17. Audio files from the time I recorded myself talking during panic attacks to try and hear the spiral and stop it. Notes to myself titled things like, "Remember you are not invisible." Things she had never seen, never asked about, never cared to notice. And mixed between them, one folder labeled for Meredith. Inside, a video. I'd recorded it the night I left. Just me, sitting at the edge of the bed, talking to the camera like I used to talk to her before she started checking out of our conversations. In the video, I told her the truth. That I knew about Alan from the beginning. That I'd seen their messages weeks ago when she left her tablet open during a shower. That I hadn't confronted her because I wanted to see if she'd stop on her own. That I had begged for her attention for months, in ways she probably didn't even notice. Refilling the gas, buying her favorite kind of napkins, learning how to cook that ridiculous beet soup she once mentioned liking when we were still dating. That I watched her fall out of love with me in slow motion and stayed quiet because I thought maybe, just maybe, loving her enough would make her love me back again. That I wasn't angry anymore, just hollow. And then I ended it with this. You said you wanted to feel chosen. I chose you. Every day. You just didn't notice. Now someone else will notice me first. I encrypted the real files after recording that. And I waited. On the third morning, I got the confirmation ping. She'd plugged in the drive. She'd opened the video, watched it twice, according to the playback log. And then, like clockwork, she tried to open another folder. But this one was locked. It was labeled legal, and that folder wasn't for her. Inside were copies of NDAs, compliance policies from Alan's company, and the unedited export of every chat she and Alan ever had, because he'd synced them to his cloud at some point, and like an idiot, used the same weak password for every platform. I hadn't shared those with anyone yet, but I could, and she knew it, because 20 minutes after opening the drive, she texted me. Just 3 words. You win. Please. I didn't reply. I watched her text sit there on my screen like a deflated balloon. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered every cold look, every quiet dismissal, every time she smiled down at her phone while I was talking and told me, I'm listening. Even when she wasn't. She wanted to break something in me. She succeeded. But she forgot one thing. You can't control what grows back in the ruins. And I wasn't done yet. It was a Thursday morning when my phone rang, number unknown, but with a New York area code. Normally, I don't answer those. Spam, robocalls, wrong numbers. But something about the timing made me pick up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted something. Anything. To give me reason not to keep staring at the hotel ceiling fan, letting my thoughts chew through me like moths in wool. Curtis, is this Curtis Halden? The voice on the other end asked, too formal, clipped. Yes, I said, already bracing. This is Philip Garrison. I'm the director of development at the Cordwright Museum. Meredith works under my department. That name hit me like a splash of cold water. Cordwright was one of the most prestigious modern art institutions on the East Coast. Meredith had spent 2 years clawing her way through smaller exhibits and fundraising boards to finally get there. This was her dream job. She used to say the museum was the only place she ever felt completely understood. She once called it her real relationship. I'm calling because I believe you may have information that relates to an internal situation involving one of our staff and a potential external conflict of interest. Would you be open to speaking off record? I sat up, suddenly wide awake. Why me? He paused. Because Meredith listed you as her emergency contact. And someone sent an untraceable digital envelope to our internal compliance team from your IP address. Oh, she'd opened the drive at home. The museum's server had traced the connection through her work laptop, maybe automatically. I hadn't even considered that. I'm not sure what I can offer, I said carefully, unsure how much to admit. She's not in trouble, he said quickly, like he'd rehearsed it. Yet. But if there's a conflict brewing between her personal affiliations and a potential consultant we're considering for a board contract, Alan Brooks, then we need to address it before it escalates. I froze. Alan Brooks, I repeated. His name came up in some fundraising committee proposals. He was flagged, and we received anonymized materials suggesting prior ethical concerns, old contracts, message threads. It's vague. But it came through a source that pinged back to your Wi-Fi router 2 days ago. My mouth went dry. I hadn't even sent anything to them. Not directly. I'd only queued up that warning packet for Alan's employer. This was Meredith's mess bleeding into professional territory she thought she had quarantined. She never disclosed a relationship with Brooks, the man continued. But now she's under review for failing to declare a conflict of interest during a funding round where he was involved. It looks personal. That's bad. I stayed quiet. Every second of silence felt like a decision. Look, he said, lowering his voice. I don't know what's going on between you two. I don't want drama. I want the museum to survive the audit we've got coming. If there's anything else we should know, now is the time. I almost told him. I almost opened the door and let the whole truth pour out. That Meredith had lied. That she'd been hiding things from both of us. That she'd weaponized emotion to manipulate outcomes without caring about the consequences. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked, what happens if she's found guilty of a conflict? She'd be removed from the curatorial team immediately. Possibly fired, depending on how far it goes. And Alan? We don't care about Alan. He's not staff. He's just noise. We care about our name. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, that old tightness in my chest returning. This wasn't what I planned. I had wanted Meredith to hurt, but professionally, publicly, I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Not because I wanted to save her, but because I didn't want her failure tied to me. Not like this. And yet, I remembered her kneeling in our kitchen, crying, begging me to undo it. I remembered her saying she wanted someone to choose her. I remembered how she looked at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching, smiling like it was the only real part of her day. I opened my email and hovered over the last message in my drafts. It was a file, untouched, containing everything the museum's internal board hadn't seen yet. Proof of the emotional manipulation, the planning, the months of deceit, spelled out in her own words from the message threads she didn't think anyone would ever see. All it would take was one click. Just one. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I closed the laptop and went outside for the first time in 2 days. The wind had picked up. The clouds were rolling in low and fast. I let the cold hit my face and tried to remember who I was before all of this. Curtis Halden. Invisible, dependable, forgettable. That man didn't exist anymore. And as I walked toward the corner cafe, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I could burn everything she built without even lighting a match. All I had to do was wait for her next move. And she was about to make it. I found the letter 2 mornings later, pressed under the wiper of my car like a scarlet warning. No envelope, just a folded piece of ivory stationery, the expensive kind she used for museum thank you notes. My name was written in her handwriting. The loops neat but slightly shaky, like she'd been crying or rushing or both. For a long minute, I didn't touch it. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The air was heavy with mist, and the street outside my rented studio was so quiet that the smallest sounds, birds, distant cars, a dog barking somewhere, felt like they were waiting for my reaction. I finally took it, sat inside the car, and unfolded the paper. The first line hit like a fist. You destroyed him, Curtis. I read it again, slower. The words were smudged slightly where a teardrop, or maybe rain, had fallen. You didn't just ruin Alan's career. His wife left him. He's under investigation. His daughter's treatment sponsorship was tied to his employer's insurance plan. And when the board terminated him, that ended too. I hope you're proud. I stopped reading. My hands clenched the edges of the paper, but I didn't tear it. Not yet. I told myself you wouldn't go this far. I told myself you were hurt, but not cruel. But you planned this. You planted the seed, watched it grow, and now you're pretending you didn't expect it to turn into poison ivy. You wanted me to see what you were capable of. You wanted to teach me fear. For a second, I saw her face again in my mind, pale, defiant, a woman balancing on the thin wire between guilt and self-pity. The letter went on. I went to the museum this morning. They suspended me indefinitely pending review. They didn't even want to hear my side. They already had copies of everything. Every chat, every file. They said anonymous whistleblower, but I know it was you. The irony? They called me unethical while shaking my hand and saying they respected my contributions. They asked me to clear my desk quietly. You wanted me broken? Congratulations. You win. I'm leaving the apartment. I left the keys on the counter. I'll send for the rest later. I don't expect forgiveness. But someday, Curtis, when the silence finally eats you alive, you'll realize that winning this way means you lost something bigger than me. It ended there. No signature. No apology. Just her initials, M.H. like she wanted to leave one last trace of who she used to be. I sat in the driver's seat for almost an hour after finishing the letter, watching fog crawl up the windshield and distort the reflections of the world outside. My stomach twisted, but not from guilt. It was something heavier, something confusing, because she wasn't entirely wrong. I had planned it. Not this outcome exactly, but the chain reaction that led here. Every click, every file, every silence. And now that everything she'd built was collapsing, I couldn't tell if I felt satisfied or sick. That night, I drove back to our old neighborhood. I told myself I just wanted closure, to see if she'd really left. The windows of the apartment were dark, curtains drawn. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange, a single lamp glowing inside, faint and unsteady. I parked across the street and waited. After a few minutes, the front door opened. Meredith stepped out carrying a small box. She didn't see me. She walked slowly to her car, put the box in the back seat, and leaned against the door like she couldn't summon the energy to move again. Her shoulders were shaking. For the first time since everything started, I didn't feel like the betrayed husband or the calculating avenger. I just felt tired. Like we'd both run out of reasons to keep the war going, but didn't know how to surrender. I could have called out to her. I could have walked over and ended it. But instead, I watched her drive away until her taillights disappeared into the fog. When I finally went inside, the apartment felt hollow, like someone had scraped the warmth right out of it. The walls echoed differently. On the kitchen counter, just like she said, were the keys. Next to them sat a flash drive. A real one this time, not my decoy. A sticky note attached read, "For when you're done being angry." I hesitated before plugging it in. The drive was encrypted, password protected, but the password hint said, "Our first fire drill." That was our story, the one thing she thought still belonged to both of us. Against my better judgment, I entered it. Inside were folders, photos, videos, small memories she'd archived over the years. Trips we took, voice memos of her laughing, recordings of her describing new art pieces late at night. But buried deep, in a folder simply called Truth, was a final file. A video recorded just hours earlier. She looked directly into the camera, eyes swollen but steady. "You wanted me to feel what you felt," she said. "Now you have. But if you think I'll vanish quietly, you're wrong. Because there's one thing you didn't plan for. What happens when the world starts asking questions? About the leaks. About the IP trace. About your anonymous tips." She gave a small, bitter smile. "You wanted me broken, Curtis. But sometimes, broken things cut deeper." The video ended with static. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. It was just changing sides. The knock came just after noon. I'd barely slept the night before. The glow of that final video, her last warning, kept replaying in my head. Her voice, the veiled threat, the bitter smile. It wasn't rage that lingered. It was disappointment. The kind that doesn't burn hot, but cold, slowly, deeply, and in places you can't reach to fix. I didn't know what to expect when I opened the door. A process server? A private investigator? Maybe even the museum board, chasing the digital trail back to me? But it was her. Meredith stood there with no makeup, no coat, no box in her hands. Just a small, nervous smile and tired eyes. For a long second, we just stared at each other, as if waiting for the script to start again. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. I leaned against the doorframe. "Then why are you here?" "To tell you the truth, finally. No edits. No performances." I let her in. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, like strangers who used to share a life. The silence between us was awkward, but not hostile. Just two people standing at the edge of something that used to be. She was the first to speak. I didn't leak anything. To anyone. I was bluffing in that video. I raised an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. "I thought I had to make you scared to get you to listen. But that's not love, is it?" "No," I said. "It's not." She took a deep breath. "You were right. About everything. I was selfish. I was careless. I didn't protect what we had. I kept telling myself you were the one who stopped showing up, but the truth is, I left long before I admitted it. I just didn't have the courage to say it out loud." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "Alan was never going to be anything real. I think I knew that. I just liked how he made me feel, for a while. But the more I leaned into that lie, the more I hated myself. And by the time I realized what I'd done to you, to us, it was too late." She looked down at her hands. But then you did what I never expected. You fought back. Not by yelling, not by begging, but by standing up. I didn't say anything. I just listened. She looked up again. I'm not here to win you back. I know I don't deserve that. I lost that chance. But I do want you to know something. She reached into her bag and slid a small envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. My resignation, she said. I told the museum everything. About Alan. About me. I took responsibility. No drama. No spin. I told them you weren't behind the leak. I'll take whatever comes. I stared at the envelope. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, surprise, or just exhaustion. I spent the last few days in the spare room at my sister's, she added. She told me I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be admired by strangers. I gave a weak smile. Smart sister. She smiled too, then stood. I'm going to disappear for a while. Not run. Just give you space. And me too. But I left one more thing on the flash drive. I tilted my head. Another video? She shook her head. No. A folder. Labeled, if you ever forgive me. It's yours to open or delete. No passwords. No games. She paused in the doorway, hand on the frame, then turned back. You were always enough, Curtis. I just couldn't see it through my own insecurities. And then she left. Not dramatically. Not with slammed doors or shattered glass. Just quietly. Like someone who'd finally stopped running. I sat there for a long time. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. Eventually, I pulled out the flash drive. Plugged it in. Found the folder. Inside were photos, dozens of them. But not of us. They were of me. Candid ones. Ones I didn't know she'd taken. Me fixing the sink. Laughing with her dad at Thanksgiving. Holding her umbrella in the rain while she tied her shoe. Sleeping on the couch with Francis the cat curled up on my chest. Each one had a note. This is the day I realized I loved you. This is when I knew I was ruining everything and didn't know how to stop. This was the moment I wanted to ask for help, but didn't. This was the last time you smiled at me like I mattered. It broke me, but not in the way she expected. It didn't break me like betrayal did. It broke me open, because for the first time since all of it began, I realized that maybe, just maybe, people can fall apart and still find their way back to being whole, even if they never do it together. I didn't text her that day. I didn't call, but I saved the folder. And 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, I sent her a photo of Francis sunbathing in the window, a message attached. She still hogs the couch. I thought you'd want to know. She replied 4 minutes later. Tell her I miss her, and that I'm proud of her human. That was it, and it was enough.